समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
आप समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
It's been months now since Op Sindoor, and yet there is a lot of clutter. There is a lot of fog about what happened. Remember the expression fog of war? So, the fog of war, although it was a very short and limited war, but the fog of war still continues. And that is what happened when. There is confusion about both things. What happened, when it happened, and then there is a third thing, which is why it happened, and fourth thing, what consequences did it have? What did it lead to? So what I'm going to do today is just go over the various key developments and interventions in the sense of the Indian side saying something, Pakistani side saying something, the Americans saying something, the Saudis saying something. So I will try and put all of that together to give us a clearer picture of what happened. I will start therefore at 4 minutes past 1 o'clock, early morning on the 7th. This is the night of 6th and 7th of May. So 1:04 a.m., that is when Rajnath Singh, the defense minister, told Parliament that Indian operation started. Indian operation to strike Pakistani terror bases started. Indian Air Force was striking two large targets. One is Markaz Taiba, that is the Lashkar-e-Taiba headquarter, Markaz Taiba at Muridke near Lahore. And second was Markaz Subhanallah in Bahawalpur in Punjab. That from the Indian border is about 158 kilometers. So that was really in the heart of Pakistani Punjab, very deep inside Pakistani Punjab. So that is when India's strike started at 1:04. In 22 minutes, that operation was over. In fact, in 22 minutes, the entire air skirmish that took place between the two air forces was over. If the Pakistanis say they fired missiles at Indian aircraft, whatever their claims are, all of that also happened within those 22 minutes. Air combat happens in very short periods of time now, because you have aircraft which can go above the speed of sound and which can make very fast maneuvers. Also now they are fighting all beyond visual range. Nobody sees anybody. It's all done electronically. So this was over in 22 minutes. So we come from 1:04 a.m. on the 7th morning to 1:26 a.m. on the 7th morning. Now, as Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh said later, unlike Balakot, when Indian Air Force did not have evidence, did not have photographic or imagery evidence to prove that they had hit the Jash center at Balakot, and he said at that point we were disappointed that even our people were not believing us. This time they had the pictures, and you will see some of those pictures as I talk. This is for Muridke as well as Bahawalpur. Now you will also see that this time Indian Air Force had taken care even to have drones positioned over these targets. That those might have been, or at least one of those might have been, a sacrificial drone, because once a drone hovers for so long over a target so deep inside Pakistan, you know that the drone will be sacrificed. But because the drone was there, of course, there were lots of other pictures, as you will see on your screen. Local people in Bahawalpur, Muridke, all took pictures when these blasts took place. There are also sounds, people saying, look what's going on. So this time, there was no dearth of evidence. Besides these two targets that the Indian Air Force hit, Indian Armed Forces hit 7 other targets. These 7 other targets are Sarjal at Tera Kala, Memuna Joya, Barnala camp in Bimbar. Bimbar is in POK. Abbas camp Kotli, that's also in POK. Sayyidina Bilal at Muzaffarabad, also in POK. And Savai Nala, also in POK. That's also known to be a favorite infiltration point for Pakistani terrorists coming in from the other side. You will see pictures of All of these or most of these as I'm speaking on your screen. Once again, either the loitering munitions that the armed forces used to strike these targets, they were sending pictures back, or they were drones taking pictures. In fact, in some cases, you can also see the loitering munition going down and striking a target, and these were hit with a fair bit of precision. In some cases, the army also used its artillery with guided munitions, and some targets were taken down. So 7 plus 2, 9 targets were down. This was over by 126. See how quickly this is moving. 126 already in the next 10 minutes. In fact, that's when I was woken up. Nishit Upadhyay, who was our editor operations, he sent me a link on WhatsApp, and that was a link to a video that had been posted in Pakistan in Bahawalpur just by onlookers who saw these explosions and these fires. And as I was watching that, within minutes of that, PIB statement came out on behalf of Government of India at 1:44 a.m. See how quickly this is moving. 1:44 a.m. PIB statement comes out announcing that this was Op Sindoor, saying that we only targeted terror targets. We did not target Pakistani military infrastructure in any way, that this is non-escalatory and proportionate, etc., etc. And we have no intention of complicating things any further. However, the Pakistanis obviously were not accepting that message. At 5 past 2, once again within 21 minutes of the Indian statement and within exactly an hour of the first Indian strike, Lieutenant General Ahmad Sharif Chaudhry, DG ISPR, who became a very familiar figure after that, he called Pakistan TV and he spoke with them, and he said India has struck 3 places from the air, and the 3 places he mentioned were Bahawalpur, Kotli and Muzaffarabad. He had not figured obviously by then that Kotli and Muzaffarabad had not been struck from the air, and that besides Bahawalpur, Muridke had also been struck. He also said the temporary pleasure of India, I'm quoting him, the temporary pleasure of India will turn into enduring grief. 8:30 a.m. Now we are all watching what's happening at night. At 8:30 a.m. Now this is 7th morning. 8:30 a.m. Pakistan's information minister is speaking on camera, and he says that India was forced to wave a white flag on the LOC and accept defeat. What that means is by that time, heavy artillery fire has started on the LOC, particularly in the Punch Rajouri area. Now we are on 7th May in daytime. The action started on 7th of May, 4 minutes past 1. Now we are well into the morning of 7th May. By 8 a.m., shelling has got really intense in the Punch sector. Already, 15 civilians have died on the Indian side in the Punch Tangdhar area. That is around time we at ThePrint are also deciding to send reporters out. It was in this shelling that a Gurdwara, a convent and a madrasa were all hit, because this was really heavy shelling and not particularly targeted at anything. I'm quite sure our side also paid back in kind. So this was a no holds barred shelling from both sides. At 9:50 a.m., Lieutenant General Ahmad Sharif Chaudhry, the DG ISPR of Pakistan, he made a release saying that 26 civilians had been killed on the Pakistani side, and that Government of India had done it following its Hindutva agenda of Narendra Modi. He also claimed that 5 Indian jets were downed, and he said there were 3 Rafales, 1 MiG-29, 1 Sukhoi 1, and 1 Heron combat drone had also been shot down. Now I don't know which drone was being used to take pictures at Muridke and Bahawalpur, because that was quite a cheeky thing to do. To bomb a place, but already have a slow-moving drone in place to record the evidence. That is the very different thing that the Indian Air Force did this time. 10:30 a.m. the same day, the first Indian briefing took place. Vikram Misri, the Foreign Secretary, led it, and that's when the country and the world was introduced to Colonel Sophia Qureshi and Wing Commander Vyomika Singh, the 2 women officers of Army and the Air Force. Through the 7th, there was a relative quiet, barring the heavy artillery exchange on the line of control in the Punch Tangdhar Rajouri area. It looks like that the commanders on both sides, the political leaders on both sides were assessing the situation and planning their next steps. Then we go into later in the evening. Later in the evening at 10:10 p.m. Shehbaz Sharif gave an address to the nation, his nation, Pakistan, and he said that India will suffer the consequences, and he boasted that it took Pakistan only a few hours to bring India down to its knees. At 10:30 p.m., Pakistan again made a statement that India had hit the Neelam Jhelum power project. Neelam Jhelum power project is, these are projects on the same river. What is called as Kishan Ganga on the Indian side is called Neelam on the Pakistani side. It's a tributary of the Jhelum. So India has a project on their side, Pakistan has a project on their side. So Pakistan made this allegation. Immediate feeling on the Indian side was that maybe they are now going to target the Kishan Ganga project on the Indian side. They were trying to create an excuse, although it's quite well established that Neelam Jhelum power project wasn't hit. It wasn't targeted. It wasn't hit. At 12:30 a.m., which brings us to 8th of May now. 12:30 a.m., Donald Trump spoke, and Donald Trump said these two sides are going tit for tat. I get along with both, and if I can do anything to help, I will be there. And he leaves it at there. 1 a.m., Pakistan's foreign minister Ishaq Dar, who's also the deputy prime minister and Sambandhi of Nawaz Sharif, he speaks to TRT World, which is a Turkish channel, and he says that the two NSA's national security advisors are in contact. You would remember that Lieutenant General Asim Malik was suddenly appointed Pakistan's NSA. That post had been vacant. He had been suddenly appointed in that post after the Pahalgam massacre, when India made it clear that there will be retribution from the Indian side. At 2 a.m. on 8th morning, a lot of the action took place at night. That is how modern wars are fought. At 2 a.m., near Amritsar, there was evidence of missile firings. People heard missile firings. That is when we have a statement from DPRO, District Public Relations Officer, saying there should be lights out, that it's a precautionary step. Everybody should switch their lights off. That is when later the Director General of Air Defense in the Army, he said that the Army had reached out to the management of the Golden Temple to request if they could also keep their lights out, so that if there were any drones coming that way, the Army could track them more easily, so drones won't get lost in the other lights, for clarity of vision. Also, that is when the Army also sought permission to position guns not in the Golden Temple complex. Never make that mistake. In fact, the general also didn't say that. It was misconstrued, but close enough to the Golden Temple to protect it from drone attacks. As the sun came out in the village of Jetwal, not far from Amritsar, people discovered remnants or debris of a projectile, of a missile. Now, it could be anything. We haven't been told what it is, and obviously armed forces are not telling anybody. It's possible. Could be the booster of one of the missiles that we fired at incoming Pakistani missiles, or it could be a Pakistani missile that our missiles intercepted. It is, however, now well understood that on this morning also, India did carry out some missile firings. In fact, if you see Snesh Alex Phillips's report from that day, that report says that S-400s were used for the first time. It is possible because Indian Air Force claims that they hit a large Pakistani aircraft really deep inside Pakistan. It could be an AWAC, an AEW aircraft, a Saab RAI, or it could be an ELINT, an electronic intelligence aircraft. Those are big, those are slow moving, those are not very maneuverable. That's why they hang back very far as possible from your borders. It is possible that the S-400 firings, which took down, as the Indian Air Force says, that big Pakistani aircraft, were made on this morning. Because it is on this morning also that Indian Air Force had sent out Israeli Harop and Harpy drones, or looking for Pakistani radars and missile batteries. One of those pictures came out quite dramatic. At 11:30 a.m. on this day, you can see this suicide drone or kamikaze drone, which has a radar seeker actually falling down almost vertically on top of a Pakistani radar and missile battery. This is at Walton Road Airport. It's a small airport which also has some military installations located there. So this radar and this missile battery and HQ-9 missile battery was located there. That got hit. That was a major setback for Pakistan. On the 8th at 12th noon, ISPR carried out a briefing where they acknowledged that Indian drones were floating over their radars and missiles, and they claimed that 12 drones had been drowned. And Lieutenant General M.S. Sharif Chaudhry said that this is yet another act of blatant aggression. India is sending out Harop drones. So they had by this time identified the drones, because these drones fall in some place and then explode. So there will be debris left, and they probably did shoot down some also. He claimed at that point that these drones attacked Lahore, Attock, and Gujranwala. That's very far inside Pakistan. Gujranwala is nearly 300 kilometers. Attock is where you cross the Indus on your way to Peshawar. In fact, that's where the famous bend in the Indus is. These drones reached that far. These are places where Pakistani radars were located. So he said Lahore, Attock, Gujranwala, Chakwal, Rawalpindi, and Bahawalpur. Yet again, Miano, Chod is in Sindh, and Malir cantonment near Karachi. All of these, he said, were targeted by Indian drones. This is something that AP Singh also confirmed later in his L.M. Katre Memorial Lecture last week. For clarity, I will tell you what Air Chief Marshal AP Singh said. He said, and I quote, "We were able to get at least 2 command and control centers like Murid and Chaklala, at least 6 radars, some of them big, some of them small. We have an indication of at least 1 AW&C in that AW&C hangar. That's at Bolari. You can see a missile having gone through that roof. That picture is a famous one. A lot of people on Twitter use it as their display pictures. And a few F-16s, which were under maintenance there, were also taken down." That's what he said. However, these missile strikes took place later. On the 8th, we are only talking of damage to some radar systems and some missile batteries with these Harop and Harpy drones. M.S. Sharif Chaudhry had also said that 4 military personnel were injured in these attacks. Those were at the Lahore radar and the MQ-9 battery at Walton Road Airport. That is not the main Lahore airport. That's a smaller airport, which is also used for recreational and business flying, but also has a military target there, which is often used for business or recreational flying. 2:15 p.m. again, DG ISPR spoke, and they said by this time they had taken down 25 Harop drones, and he said the enemy is, quote unquote, panicked by the loss of 5 jets and its personnel as well. At 5:30 p.m. that day was the India briefing. At the India briefing, it was said that Pakistan attempted to engage a number of military targets in North and Northwest India the previous night, the night of 7th and 8th. That is when we said those missile interceptions were seen over Amritsar. Pakistan attempted to engage a number of military targets in North and Northwest India using drones and missiles, and the targets the Indian briefers mentioned were Avantipura, that's in Kashmir, near Pulwama, Avantipura, Srinagar, Jammu, Pathankot, Amritsar, Kapurthala, Nal in Rajasthan, Jalandhar has a big cantonment, Ludhiana, Adampur, the big air base, Bathinda, again a big air base as well as a cantonment, Chandigarh, Falodi in Rajasthan, Uttarlai also in Rajasthan, and Bhuj in Gujarat. That all these were targeted the previous night, and the Indian briefer said that everything was intercepted that came from the Pakistani side, all drones, all missiles, and now the pieces and debris were being examined, and that Indian drone operations were in response to this. I would like to add that the Indian drone operations were part of a larger suppression of enemy air defense operation, because Indian Air Force had now decided to pay back the Pakistanis. Before that, they wanted to suppress the Pakistani air defense system. And that is what these Harpy and Harop drones were used for. Indian briefers said that our own integrated counter UAS or unmanned aerial system like a big drone. And air defense batteries, air defense systems neutralized all of these threats. And then they confirmed that this morning, 8th morning, India targeted air defense radars and systems across Pakistan. And they said we acted in the same domain, and same domain as in suppression of air defense, and same intensity. And they also said that the Lahore air defense had been neutralized. I'm quoting them. Then we come to 6 p.m. on the 8th. On the 8th, 6 p.m., Ishaq Dar, the Pakistani foreign minister, he says Pakistan has the right to retaliate. Now it looks like the Pakistanis are feeling a little bit hit. So he says Pakistan has the right to retaliate because last night, perhaps it needs clarification. We did not take escalatory mode or move. We only acted in self-defense. So he's actually setting the stage up for something more intense from the Pakistani side. So Defense Minister at 6:45 p.m. said, he said to Reuters that India's drone incursions into Pakistan have made attacks on India by the Pakistanis increasingly certain. And this is around time he also said, because there were some statements from some Pakistanis that all right, we have had a tit for tat, right? So we are happy to disengage if India doesn't escalate. But he provided clarity now, and he said India has inflicted damage on the Pakistani side, so India must take a hit. So this is the defense minister of Pakistan, who's also been given a high honor, a bit like Pakistan's Padma Vibhushan right now, for his quote-unquote distinguished performance. He's the one who said to Sky News that the evidence of Indian aircraft having been shot down was all over the social media. The same champion, he now had let India know that Pakistan was going to intensify the fighting. At 7:30 p.m., Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, we are on the 8th now, called Shahbaz Sharif. Shahbaz Sharif, they said, according to Pakistani readout, that Pakistan has the right to self-defense. Rubio said in his readout, State Department readout, that there is need for India and Pakistan to work closely to de-escalate. At 8:35 p.m., DG ISPR came out to speak along with Ishaq Dar, the foreign minister. And there they said, and this is very loaded, they said Pakistan has never targeted any civilian populations in India, particularly in Punjab. So they are getting more and more obsessed with Punjab. They had indicated their interest in Punjab and the Sikhs the previous day also. Now is again saying that Pakistan has never targeted the civilian population in Punjab. And on the other hand, he accused India. He said that India fired 4 projectiles in Amritsar. One of these strayed into Pakistan and was neutralized there. The other 3 hit something. Now we don't know anything hitting anything in Amritsar on that day. So it's possible that the Pakistanis had fired these projectiles. These had been intercepted, and these interceptions were seen and heard by the people of Amritsar early morning that day. But Ahmed Sharif Chaudhry said that India had done this to incite anti-Sikh sentiments. Now, how do you incite anti-Sikh sentiments? By targeting the Sikhs. Even if you're targeting the Sikhs, I don't know. But that's what he said. And he said, we will never attack, he's saying that, civilian population, particularly the Sikh community. This kind of malicious use of projectiles can only be done by the Hindutva government of Narendra Modi. And then he goes on to say, in 21st century, because he knows that India will say that we fired nothing, he says, in 21st century, whether you admit it or not, all projectiles have a digital trace and signature, which means we can prove to the world that these were Indian projectiles. However, there were no projectiles fired from the Indian side because anybody would see it precisely for that reason, and no projectiles hit anything in Amritsar that day. Whatever was there was intercepted, and you can imagine that only the Indian side would intercept those projectiles. They had come from Pakistan. So around time this press conference was going on, a very heavy volley of loitering munitions and drones also came over Amritsar, and some of them hit some places here and there, including one in Jammu city, in a crowded street. So Jammu was under very heavy attack. And 9:20 p.m. At 9:20 p.m., The Pakistanis came on camera once again, and now they said they are obsessed with the 6. And now they said one Indian drone, they said we have shot down 29 other Indian drones, but one Indian drone had now been targeted at Nankana Sahib at the Gurdwara, and that had also been taken out. So once again, trying to instigate the 6. At 10 p.m., Rubio calls Jaishankar on our side. At 10:11 p.m., 11 minutes after that call, Jammu, Pathankot, Udhampur are targeted with missiles and drones, all of which are neutralized. This was disclosed in a tweet by Headquarters Integrated Defense Staff in India. 11 p.m., Tammy Bruce, the State Department spokesperson, one of the State Department spokespersons, says that Rubio has called both sides and urged de-escalation and, quote unquote, expressed support for a direct dialogue between India and Pakistan. At no point is America saying we are willing to mediate. They are saying we encourage a direct dialogue and de-escalation. India has said, on the other hand, both sides respond. India says what they are doing is basically fight terrorism. Pakistani said that they are settling scores over loss of civilian lives. Now we come to 9th May, 2:15 a.m. Pakistan Foreign Office at this hour denies attacks on 3 Indian air bases. Earlier, India had claimed that Pakistanis have tried to attack Jaisalmer, Srinagar, Pathankot. The Pakistani spokesperson said at this time at 2:15 a.m. on the 9th. So see this timestamps, 2:50 a.m. on the 9th, that this was reckless propaganda. No such thing has happened. At 2 a.m. the same night, just before the Pakistani spokesman came out, just 15 minutes before that, J.D. Vance had spoken to Fox. And speaking to Fox, he had said, we want to see de-escalation. And then I quote from him, he said, fundamentally, this is none of our business. We have nothing to do with American ability to control it. And that's when everybody thought that maybe Americans were washing their hands off the situation. At 8:15 a.m. the next morning, 8:15 a.m., now we are well into the 9th morning. After daybreak, 8:15 a.m., Rizwan Saeed was Pakistan's ambassador to the US. He tells CNN that the two NSAs are in touch. At 1 p.m. on the 9th, Pakistani state media says that by this time, Pakistan has taken down 77 Indian drones, of which he says on May 8, 2029 drones were taken down, and now on May 9, another 48 drones were taken out, so a total of 77 drones were taken out. It's moving very fast. At 2:20 p.m., Pakistan Defense Minister Khwaja Asif, he speaks at the National Assembly, which is in session, and he said that these drones which had come from India, he had by now diagnosed what these drones were doing, although these drones had already carried out a fair bit of damage already. Damage is physical in terms of destroying a few of the radars and at least one missile battery, but also by forcing the Pakistanis to switch off the radars, because these drones have seekers and sensors. So when a radar is switched on, these drones can catch that radiation and then latch onto it and go to the radar and hit it, riding it. So they had forced the Pakistanis to switch off these radars as a precaution. By this time, they figured it out. So Pakistani Defense Minister tells his National Assembly that these drones were trying to detect locations of the Pakistani radars, of course. That is the reason we did not intercept them. We did not intercept them, and once they had lost their way, then we shot them down. At 5:30 p.m., the regular routine Indian briefing takes place, where Indian briefers say, one, that they found Turkish drones used by the Pakistanis, including the debris of Turkish drones. Pakistan buys a lot of drones from Turkey, so no surprise. And also that an armed drone from Pakistan had tried to attack the Batinda military station. Batinda also has a big air base and had been taken out. At 8:15 p.m., Pakistan carries out a tri-service press conference led by the DGISPR, where they accuse India of all the usual things, and Air Vice Marshal Aurangzeb Ahmad, who is the operations chief of Pakistan Air Force, he does a show and tell where he claims that 5 Indian aircraft were shot down, and he tries to give some evidence. At 8 p.m. the same day, that evening also, you can see, if you would remember seeing on your TV screens these big swarms of Pakistani drones mixed with loitering munitions coming across into almost all of our border districts. One of those strikes a family in a street in Firozpur, where three members of the family are injured, of whom two die later. That's at 8 p.m. on the 9th. At 11:50 p.m. on the 9th, Ishaq Dar now speaks out and he appreciates the Saudis' involvement in peacemaking. The Saudi Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Abdul bin Ahmad Al Jubair, 12:15 a.m. Now we come to the most dramatic part of this engagement. The first dramatic part was at 22 minutes between 1:04 a.m. and 1:26 a.m. on the 7th morning. Now the night and the day of drama and big action, kinetic action begins. At 12:15 a.m., you see this video, and you will see this video on your screens, that there is the interception of a Pakistani missile, and it's a sizable Pakistani missile, which is flying over Sirsa. It is not directed at Sirsa because it's not falling at Sirsa, because these missiles, once they start falling, then they become ballistic because then gravity also comes in. It is not falling. It's flying over Sirsa. It was widely guessed, because you can check out with telemetry where something is headed. It was widely presumed that was directed at some target in or around Delhi. That missile is intercepted by Indian anti-missile defenses, either an Akash battery or a Barak battery, or maybe an S-400 battery, I don't know. One of those batteries. That is a dramatic picture. You can see and more than see, hear that missile being intercepted, the explosion, and the birds and the peacocks at night are all startled, and they all start making a racket. That is something that the whole country saw, and that is something that the Indian Air Force also saw. And I think that is the time, I'm now making a presumption, that is the time that Indian Air Force was now given the clearance to go and pay back the Pakistanis for whatever they may have been doing so far. So Indian Air Force had been preparing, they had suppressed Pakistan's air defenses, maybe they were waiting for a provocation. That provocation came with this. 12:15 Indian time, 12:45 Pakistan time. There is a half-hour time difference. It's very important to understand these timelines and these timestamps. At 1:30 a.m. the same night, that is just an hour and a quarter after this missile was intercepted over Sirsa, at 1:30 a.m., approximately around that time, two JF-17s appear on the Pakistani side, still deep inside Pakistan, and launch these C-400 missiles, hoping to target the S-400 batteries at Adampur. However, one was intercepted and one exploded in the fields. That crater is available for anybody to see. No S-400 was hit, although in the Pakistani Gallantry Awards now, 2 awards have been given to pilots who are credited with having carried out successful strikes against S-400 batteries. I can tell you that there is zero evidence that any S-400 missile battery was hit. That is also the reason that Narendra Modi, as soon as this ended, the next day he was at Adampur. He had an S-400 battery behind him, a radar van, and he had also been shown walking in and out of the radar truck to prove to the world that battery was intact. Nothing had been hit. So this series of big attacks took place from Pakistan. The reason we have to understand all of this is that the Pakistanis later claimed that they had planned their Banyan al-Mursus only after the Fajr prayers in the morning. That will be at 4:02 a.m. the prayer time on that day, the Fajr prayer time that day in Pakistan, and they would have launched their attack after those prayers. That's what they said. However, this flurry of attacks will tell you, this flurry of very, very potent attacks, because this is also around time that a volley of Fateh missiles were launched at various targets in India, which were all taken down. I think which were all taken down or which were misdirected and did not hit anything of any consequence And the odd one which probably wasn't taken out, hit nothing of consequence because it was completely misdirected, or maybe it was confused also through spoofing or whatever counters are available. And that later, one of our deputy chiefs of staff, that is Lieutenant General Rahul Singh, he said that Pakistan had hoped that they will pulverize India and bring India to its knees in 48 hours. This was the first effort of that, and this failed. Once this had failed, the Pakistanis were up to something else. They were not done yet because they were going to fire more missiles, and they fired more missiles at 2 a.m. And I noticed it because I saw a tweet from Shashank Joshi, who's the defense editor of The Economist. None of us were sleeping those days or those nights. So I saw a tweet from him saying, what is this? What is the Pakistani general saying? And I quickly searched and I found the Pakistani general. That is Lieutenant General Ahmad Sharif Chaudhry, suo motu. He just came out on his own, recorded a statement. There was nobody, and released that statement. And he said, I will tell you something very disturbing. This is heartbreaking or something like that. I can't believe it that a country can target its own people. India is targeting the Sikhs of Punjab. So just now from Adhampur, India launched 6 ballistic missiles targeting Amritsar, because you know how much Narendra Modi's government dislikes the minorities, but we stand with India's Sikhs, we stand with all the Sikhs, we stand with all the minorities. Translated, what that meant was that Pakistan had fired missiles in that direction, and they were now creating a cover. Those missiles, it's quite evident, were all intercepted. And maybe, as I said, if one wasn't intercepted, it fell in some fields or some place of no consequence. And in this rhetorical flourish, DG ISPR also said that this was India's sinister plan, because he claimed that one Indian missile had also gone and hit Afghanistan. That is something the Afghan government denied the next day. And this is India's sinister plan to push the region and beyond into havoc. He had just finished speaking, or maybe he was still in the process of speaking, when the first Indian attacks over Pakistani airbase took place. So once again, you can see pictures that came out of Pakistani bystanders or nearby villagers of the Noor Khan base being hit. Noor Khan is the base for Rawalpindi. It's next door to the Pakistani general headquarters. It's not far from the Pakistani nuclear command center. It's not far from where Pakistanis reputedly store some nuclear weapons, but India did not target that because two countries have a treaty whereby they exchange the list of their nuclear locations, and they are treaty bound not to attack them. So this social media excitement that went on over the next several days, that was misplaced. That is something that India also repeatedly denied officially, that India did not target any nuclear storage. This sudden item number appearance or guest appearance that the DG ISPR made, this also followed minutes after the first Indian strikes over Noor Khan Air Base. That was hit, and also the bases at Murid, which is Chakwal, and Rafiki were hit in Shorecourt. DG ISPR said that India has targeted these bases and all of these are safe. So Pakistani action started at least 4 hours before the time of the Fajr prayer that morning, and Indian reply had also started the same morning, much before the Fajr prayer. Later, Shahbaz Sharif said that we had planned this Banyanul Marsoos. I was in my swimming pool and somebody came to me and said that India had attacked our air bases with BrahMos missiles. And later he said, हमारे सिपह सलार आसिम मुनीर बिल्कुल हिले नहीं, बिल्कुल घबराए नहीं, and he responded to it. I presume that's why he's given him Pakistan's second highest gallantry award, as if in combat. At 2:15 a.m., see how fast this night is moving. 2:15 a.m. in India, we can see the first visuals of Noor Khan Air Base being hit and burning. Those are posted by local civilians in Pakistan. At 4:30 a.m., Pakistan says officially that they have launched Banyanum Marsoos. We are now on the 10th morning. 10th morning. This is the night of 9th and 10th, but we are now in the 10th morning. The Fajr prayer is over, and Pakistanis officially say that Banyanum Marsoos has started, and this is stated by Pakistan's Information Minister Ataullah Tarar. See his picture. This is around time that Indian defense correspondents, including Snehesh Alex Philip, and he calls me at that time saying that the Ministry of Defense is called. Looks like things have got really intense between India and Pakistan. MOD is going to hold a briefing at 5:45 a.m. So I'm going there. So everybody woke up. We woke everybody up because we wanted to know what's going on. At 5:45, however, that briefing did not take place, and the MOD told correspondents who had reached there that there will be a briefing at the regular time, which is 10:30 a.m. So it looks like whatever the Pakistanis had planned or directed at India or targeted India with, that danger was now gone. It had been successfully countered. At 7:30 a.m., that is not on the 10th morning, at 7:30 a.m., DG ISPR claimed that S-400 battery was hit in India at Adampur. At 8 a.m., Ishaq Dar spoke to GOTV in Pakistan. He said the operation that we started today, it will all end in some way. So he's trying to look for an off-ramp. It all depends on what India wants. Pakistan had no choice. I'm quoting him. Pakistan had no choice. Noor Khan, everything that they have done, we are taking revenge. So he's now acknowledging that their bases got attacked. At 8:42 a.m., Indian Army stated that Pakistanis had targeted at 5 a.m. the Khasa camp in Amritsar with multiple drones, and that all drones had been taken down. Now, while the fighting is going on, diplomacy is also going on. At 8:45 a.m. on the 10th, Rubio now by this time has figured who the boss is in Pakistan. So he calls Munir now. He's already spoken with Ishaq Dar and with Shahbaz Sharif. Now he calls General Munir, still General, because he knows who has the power in Pakistan. At 9:07, India issues a statement denying any damage by the JF-17s or by any other attackers to the S-400 batteries. India says everything is intact. Now, I do understand this is not something that's on the record, but it's something that's been written about by many people who were watching this closely. By 9:30 a.m., it looks like there's a request from the Pakistani side for another call, and maybe at this point, ceasefire is being requested. But it's my understanding that the Indian Air Force wanted a few more hours of action. And that time is bought by the Indian authorities, saying we'll find where the DGMO is. We'll set up time for a call. At 10:20 a.m., now Rubio calls Ishaq Dar on the other side. 10:45 is the Indian briefing. At the Indian briefing now, it is stated that Rafiqi, Murid, Chaklala, Rahim Yar Khan, Sukur, Chunya is where the radar is, and other radar sites at Pasrur, Sialkot, they've all been attacked. They've all been struck. At 11:40 now, Rubio calls Jai Shankar because Americans are also getting frantic now. It was a very busy day for Rubio as well. At 12:17, Ishaq Dar says that he's had a conversation with Saudi Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan, who asked him if Pakistan wants to continue the war or ceasefire, and he says if India ceases fire, it's okay by me. It's okay by us. We don't want to stretch this fighting. At 12:34, moving it very fast. At 12:34, Defense Minister Khwaja Asif, the Pakistani Defense Minister, he says, and I quote from him, the nuclear option is not on the cards. And then he says at Noor Khan, nothing was hit except a car. Obviously, something was burning, so they had to say something was burning. He said it's a car. The Pakistanis now wanted a phone call, and at 12:37, this is Randhir Jaiswal, the Indian spokesperson of the MEA. He later said that at 12:37, India got an approach from the Pakistani High Commission in Delhi that Pakistani DGMO wanted to talk to the Indian DGMO, because what India was telling the Americans Rubio was that, look, we had said on the morning of the 7th that we don't want to escalate. We've carried out our attacks on terrorist sites. We have no fight with the Pakistani military. We were quite happy to close the chapter there. It's the Pakistanis who decided to drag it on. So if they want ceasefire, they have to call and ask for ceasefire. Those negotiations were going on. That is what probably the Pakistanis wanted in the morning of the 10th. But Indian Air Force wanted more time to complete the payback in a more visible manner. 12:37, Pakistan High Commission asked for a call again, and then at 3:30 this call took place. Ranveer Jaiswal's statement said it took place at 3:30 because he said the Pakistanis had some technical difficulties on their side in connecting this hotline. You know what that means. That's how diplomacy is done. Everything is done between the lines. Everything is said and done between the lines. At 3:30, the two sides decided on the ceasefire. 3:35, the call took place and the two sides decided on the ceasefire. This is the story. However, neither the Indian side nor the Pakistani side announced after this call that they had agreed on a ceasefire. And that is the time that Donald Trump made use of, because it was in that period that he put out his tweet saying both sides have agreed to ceasefire, both sides have agreed on an immediate ceasefire, as if he had made it possible. And that had unintended consequences. Maybe on his part, he didn't imagine how complicated that will be. Maybe he did not understand because he doesn't have much of a South Asia team around him. So maybe he did not understand how that would make things difficult and complicated with India. We are all now picking up the debris of India-US relations, essentially as a result of that claim, which he has then repeated maybe 30 times since then. And you can be sure that by the time you're watching it, he might have repeated it a couple of times again. This is probably our longest episode of Cut the Clutter so far. The reason I decided to do this in so much detail was that there was so much clutter in those 87 dramatic hours. So the idea was to give you as much clarity as possible. Please do tell me if I've been able to do that adequately. I will look for your comments, and thank you very much for enduring this for this long. That is especially to those of you brilliant people, wonderful people, patient people who are still watching it till the end.